All right, this morning, the White House is facing intense pressure for more transparency in the Jeffrey Epstein case. President Trump said twice that Attorney General Pam Bondi should release any information she finds to be credible, but Bondi knocked down that suggestion.
Today, our memo speaks for itself, and we'll get back to you on anything else. I haven't seen all of his statements today.
Bondi is referring to the DOJ memo that concludes there is no Epstein client list and that he committed suicide while awaiting trial in 2019. Bondi also repeatedly refused to answer questions about her reported fallout with Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino. This is what the president said about him.
Do you have confidence in Dan Bongino?
I like Dan Bongino.
With us now, former FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Mike Feinberg, who says he was pressured to resign from the Bureau earlier this year at the direction of Dan Bongino. Mike, nice to see you. The personality on Bongino out of this for a second. What happens when the Deputy Director of the FBI might or might not have the confidence of the president and might or might not be feuding with the Attorney General? What does that do to the rank and file?
It's a really interesting dynamic. First of all, I think it's important to caveat what we're about to talk about by noting that it is very rare for any of the senior FBI leadership to have as much interaction with the president as we see under this administration. So that in and of itself is an anomaly. But if that's going to happen, and that relationship is going to become strained at the same time that the relationship with Maine DOJ becomes strained, it has a real effect on the FBI's ability to do its job. FBI agents don't like to admit this, but it's really difficult for them to move their cases forward without the assistance of federal prosecutors. And to the extent there's a lot of friction between those two buildings, the mission suffers.
All right, I want to play a little bit more of what the president is now saying about the Epstein case. Let's listen.
I would say that, these files were made up by Comey. They were made up by Obama. They were made up by the Biden, we went through years of that.
So, Mike, what's wrong with that timeline?
What's wrong with that timeline is that the Epstein investigation, arrest, and suicide took place during the first Trump administration. It emphatically was not something that the Biden DOJ had anything whatsoever to do with.
And not only that, I mean, his original arrest and conviction in Florida was during the Bush administration, right? The ultimate arrest, conviction, and suicide were during the Trump administration. Comey was actually out of the FBI by the time that all happened because Trump had pushed him out. It's farcical on its face. So when you see that kind of timeline, again, from the president, if you're in the FBI, if you're still there, if you were there in the late 20-teens, what are you supposed to think?
I'll just say this. This is one of the very many reasons that the senior leadership of the FBI has traditionally been drawn from a pool that includes the judiciary and the legal and policy world. When you bring in a group of people who, just to be blunt, are fundamentally unserious and have gained most of their professional experiences through the lens of conspiratorial podcasting, they're going to have difficulty running what is a complex, sober-minded, pragmatic organization.
All right, Mike Feinberg, been great to have you on this morning. Thanks so much for being with us. Kate?
All right, some other headlines we're watching. Police say a 22-year-old has been arrested and charged with the murder of American Idol's longtime music supervisor. Robin Kay and her husband were found dead in their Los Angeles area home on Monday. And according to LA police, the couple suffered from possible gunshot wounds during a burglary. Now, police said the couple returned home while the suspect was inside and they were killed after a confrontation. One neighbor told a CNN affiliate that the couple had a previous break-in in the spring and had installed spikes on their fences and security cameras because of it.
After they did all the security updates, Tom says, I don't think they'll be back, and if they do, they're going to have a hard time.
Now, Kay had been with American Idol from 2009 until 2023. The show's producers say that Kay was, quote, truly loved and respected by all who came in contact with her. A hijacked plane forced a shutdown of airspace over one of Canada's busiest airports yesterday. Police say a Cessna departed from a flight training airport and flew about 40 miles to Vancouver before it started circling. Air traffic controllers had to briefly ground flights and abort landings because of it.
We do have an aircraft that has been hijacked, is in the vicinity of the airport overflying.
Think about hearing that over comms. A suspect was arrested, but so far police have not identified any motive or other explanation as to why the plane was stolen. Also new this morning, there's video that was just released showing a massive fire at an industrial facility in Alabama. The blaze sent flames, I mean, just look at it, hundreds of feet into the air. 30 different agencies rushed to the building Saturday night to put out the fire at the facility that was near the Georgia-Alabama state line, actually. No one was seriously hurt, thank God, but several firefighters did suffer minor injuries. Sarah?
All right. The murder trial of a Colorado dentist accused of killing his wife is off to an explosive start. Prosecutors saying he poisoned her protein shakes and, once caught, cooked up a plan while in jail to have the lead detective in the case killed. In opening statements yesterday, prosecutors told the jury that an affair and a growing financial troubles led defendant James Craig to kill his wife. They say evidence will show what Craig used to drug his wife's protein shakes. The defense calling the case against her husband pure speculation. CNN's Jean Casares joins me now. What stood out to you in these opening statements?
Well, that there's one thing that both sides agree on at this point, which is amazing, but that she died of drug poisoning, a chemical poisoning. Now, how did it happen? That is the big issue right there. You know, Sarah, we knew so much from the probable cause affidavit. We learned even more yesterday. So we already knew that on March 4th, someone under the name of James Craig's account ordered arsenic metal. We know that on the 6th of March in 2023, he made her a protein shake, and after that, she felt drugged. Now we're learning that on March 8th, 2 days later, he went to the store and he bought 12 bottles of Visine. That has tetrahydroline in it, if I'm saying that correctly. Probably not. March 9th, he went to the store and bought more Visine. Then on March 15th, pivotal day, according to prosecutors, he took a capsule that she had of medication, real medication. He emptied it out and he put potassium cyanide inside that capsule. And that there is a text telling his sister-in-law, be sure at home to give her that capsule. She's got to have that medication. Very shortly after that, she went to the hospital for the very last time. Watch some opening statements from the prosecution and then the defense.
He went in that room to murder, to deliberately and intentionally end her life with a fatal dose of cyanide.
They never find any arsenic or cyanide. Angela was a very broken person. You may not like him, you may not think he's a good husband, but that's not what you're here to decide.
Now, the motive that prosecutors say is a financial issues, but also the girlfriend. He met a woman at a dental conference. She's a dentist also, February 22nd through 25th. We want to show you some texts in that interim time before that first protein shake was given. And by the way, they exchanged 4,000 texts in that short period of time, 80 expressions of love and a future together. So he originally says shortly after he meets her, the problem is that I might be completely in love with you after 3 days. Now, Angela, his wife, went to visit family in Utah March 1st through 5th. He texts the girlfriend, Karen Kane. Maybe she will decide to stay gone for a long time. It would definitely make my life easier. And then on March 6th, he sent another text after that protein shake. Just for the record, I will never drug you. Now, Sarah, I've got to say, there are things in the defense camp here. First of all, no surveillance video of him ever ordering drugs in the dental office. They never found the arsenic and the potassium cyanide. They never found it at all. The protein shake containers, no trace of those drugs at all. And the defense is saying that they just had tunnel vision. From the beginning, they had tunnel vision and never looked at anyone else. And they're insinuating that Angela took her own life.
That's what I was going to ask you, because it sounds like in the opening statements that the defense is trying to say she was poisoned to death, but it wasn't at his hand, it was at her hand.
Yes, that she had suicidal tendencies, that she had issues, that she, on her own words, said she was broken, and that led to this. Now, of course, at the hospital, when she went there for the first time, they asked her, have you had any thoughts of suicide? Said no. By the way, they never tested her from poisons when she was in the hospital that whole time.
Right, and she'd been in a couple of different times before this, and they have 6 children. This case, a very difficult one to watch, and lots of just explosive details coming out right at the beginning.
We believe the daughters may testify today. A comfort dog will be under where they testify to help them get through it.
All right, wow. All right, Jean Casares, thank you so much. You're always great at these stories. All right, a new hour of CNN News Central starts right now.
New warning signs for President Trump in a new CNN poll. Americans weighing in on the sweeping new tax and spending bill that he just signed into law. Sum it up, big problems with the big, beautiful bill. And bipartisan agreement on Capitol Hill should be celebrated, but this one because of the most bizarre reason and in the most bizarre way. The growing bipartisan calls now demanding the Justice Department release new information on the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, just as Donald Trump is making clear he just wants this to go away. And more than 10,000 summer and after-school programs now facing new and real uncertainty as the administration moves full steam ahead to dismantle the Department of Education. I'm Kate Baldwin with John Berman and Sarah Seidner. This is CNN News Central.
New this morning, CNN polling showing President Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill that he just signed into law is getting some ugly reviews from voters. Roughly 6 in 10 Americans say they oppose the president's sweeping tax and spending plan. But the response is not entirely negative. Joining us now, CNN Washington Bureau Chief and Political Director David Chalian. David, can you break down for us how Americans feel about this mega bill? And there are lots of different parts, but overarching doesn't look great.
Yes, this is going to be an uphill sales battle for the administration, which begins in earnest today when J.D. Vance heads to Battleground, Pennsylvania to do just that, Sarah. Take a look at the overall numbers you mentioned here. 61% of Americans in our brand new poll by SSRS oppose the mega bill that Trump signed into law on July 4th. 39% support it. Look at it by party. Obviously, you'd imagine Democrats are overwhelmingly opposed. Republicans are in favor here. But if you look at the independent number, only 32% of independents support this bill. 2/3 of independents are opposed. And I would note on the Republican line, 1 in 5 Republicans, 19% of Republicans say they are opposed to the bill, Sarah.
All right. So what does this spell out for the sort of overarching Trump approval rating?
Well, Donald Trump's approval rating in our brand new poll stands at 42% approval, which is roughly where he was when we last checked in as well. So we're not seeing a ton of movement. Now, I should say 42% is not where any president wants to be. He's upside down there by 16 percentage points. 58% of Americans disapprove of how he's handling his job as president. But we're not yet seeing any kind of movement in his approval rating, which tends to be, in the history of Donald Trump on the public stage, operating within a very narrow band. And we're seeing that here in the second term as he approaches the 6-month mark as well.
Yeah, and certainly already Democrats are kind of seizing on these numbers and trying to use this as 2026 gets closer and closer. David Chalian, thank you so much for breaking that down for us, the new CNN polling there. John?
All right, with us now, CNN political commentator Alyssa Farah Griffin and former Chief of Staff to then Vice President Mike Pence, Mark Short. So, Alyssa, as David Chalian just laid out, 2/3 of independents at this point oppose this bill that was just passed. 1/5 of Republicans, which is very high for a Trump-related situation here. What do you think of where this goes next?
This is always a challenge you run into when you do a huge sort of omni bill where you combine a bunch of different policies together. So the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which were extended in this, were widely popular in the first Trump term. If that had been a standalone piece of legislation, that'd be something Trump could travel around the country and say, hey, the average family is going to save about $4,000 a year on their taxes because of my tax cuts. Some of the energy policy that's included is something he could brag about. But then there's the less popular aspects of it, some long-term cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. Those are things that end up getting lumped into the broader agenda and policy. But I'd say this, we're more than a year out from the midterms. Are Democrats going to be able to harness that and tell their voters, hey, these cuts that haven't come, they're actually delayed down the road, are a result of this bill? And I think it remains to be seen. Democrats have kind of struggled to find their messaging on this.
You know, Mark, it's interesting. In this same poll, and I don't have the number in front of me, but more voters than not say they do not approve of President Trump's priorities right now. One of those priorities has clearly been tariffs, which is something that you've spoken out against, many of the tariffs that he has tried to impose, then gone back on, then imposed again. Greg Ip of the Wall Street Journal this morning has an interesting take on the tariffs. He writes, Trump has been clear and single-minded about his goal. He wants tariffs, the higher the better, whether that is achieved unilaterally or via deals is secondary. So even without deals, Trump has, by his own definition of success, already won his trade war. Greg Ip's point, Mark, is that Trump's got these 10% tariffs, in some cases higher across the board, and that's a win for him. What do you think about that?
John, I think that's right. I think that the president has actually had some pretty good economic news in the first 6 months. The jobs reports have been strong. The inflation has stayed relatively tame. The markets have hit all-time highs. As Alyssa said, he just passed tax extension relief. But I worry that I don't think the tariff impact has really happened yet. I think the largest retailers in our country pre-purchased inventory. Some of the largest auto manufacturers are still selling automobiles that were basically built with parts prior to tariffs taking effect. And so I think that there's a lot more damage to the economy coming with this protectionist trade policy. And as Greg said in his piece, and as you're articulating, the reality is that the 10% baseline tariffs are already 4 times greater than what our average has been for the last couple of decades. And there's no indication they're going down. Like, people question that the president's going to chicken out and actually threaten tariffs and lower them, but still the trend is to continue to bring tariffs up higher and higher. And so the costs are going to continue to grow, and I think you're going to see job implications of that as well in the second half of this year.
We did just see in the CPI numbers that came out yesterday a little bit of an uptick in inflation there that a lot of people think is the first bite that these tariffs might be taking. I want to shift to Jeffrey Epstein and the defense now that President Trump is issuing. And I want to play again what he said just yesterday.
And we just made this system worse. This system is strained. We're going to close hospitals. People aren't going to.
All right, Debbie Dingell today playing the role of President Trump. I will read out loud for you a dramatic reenactment of what President Trump said about the Epstein case yesterday. Oh, wait, actually, we can have the actor do it himself. This is President Trump.
I would say that, you know, these files were made up by Comey. They were made up by Obama. They were made up by the Biden we went through years of that.
All right, I want to read you what Scott Adams, the Dilbert creator, who's a huge fan of President Trump, said about this, and I'm going to try to not swear. Scott Adams wrote on Twitter, "The new blank covering story is the Epstein files were made up by Democrats. I expect better BS from my president," he says.
I remain stunned by how bad the PR around this Epstein issue has been. I sort of think that the president may have been caught flat-footed on how big of an issue this was to his base. And Donald Trump is rarely not in lockstep with where his base is on issues. But listen, this is now a weeks-long story. The White House first needs to punt this to DOJ. Say, we're not talking about it any further. This is fully DOJ's purview. And DOJ needs to get out there and they need to unite around what is the narrative? Is there anything else that could be released? It's almost certain that there's grand jury testimony, there's victim testimony, things that can be redacted but released to the public that might assuage some of this just skepticism that there is nothing else there. But if I'm the White House, I'm distancing myself. I'm making it a DOJ problem. And you got to give Pam Bondi a little bit of time to say, you got to figure this out or we're moving a different direction.
Was that President Trump distancing himself?
It didn't make any sense. And his base won't buy that. This is something that is so animating. It is so deeply felt by his base. They feel like it is one of the most evil acts that could be committed. And they want want accountability, that's not going to pass.
You know, Mark, another thing the president sort of said yesterday, to paraphrase, that the people who are fueling this story are basically bad people, the only people interested in it. These are his people. These are people who helped push him into office.
Yeah, John, I think it's important to step back for a second that when Donald Trump came onto the scene in 2015, 2016, he positioned himself as the outsider who was going to reform government. And a lot of his supporters view him as the truth teller who's there to actually unearth many of the secrets that they think are hid from them. And so when last year itself, during the campaign cycle, your now Attorney General, your FBI Director, your Deputy FBI Director, your Vice President, all proclaimed that there's a lot of nefarious information in those files and they're going to make sure that they're released. And then you come into office and you say, I have the files on my desk. And then you say that we've had an issue that released the files to a group of social media influencers. And then your narrative becomes actually there are no files. And yet now the narrative is that the files were created by Comey, Obama, and Hillary. I think it's quite a remarkable narrative arc. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people to try to stomach because they view him as the guy who's going to come to D.C. and unearth these things. And now it feels like it's a cover-up.
And just remember, you know, Epstein was arrested and put in jail and then ultimately took his life during Donald Trump's presidency. Just very quickly, each of you, do you think Congress will ever take a vote on this? Do you think Republicans will let themselves take a vote on this where ultimately they would suggest they were trying to force something? Alyssa, first to you.
A discharge petition's the only way to do it. You'd have to get some Democrats to unite with Republicans and force a vote on the floor. I have no idea if that'll happen. Speaker Johnson, I don't think, would be eager to have that vote, but it could happen.
Mark, what do you think?
I think the president still has a lot of sway over the members in Congress. I don't see them having a vote on this. I do think at some point there'll be pressure. They have to release something. Whether or not what they release will be sufficient, John, I think is a question.
Well, Sarah Griffin, Mark Short, great to see you both. Thank you very much. Kate?